So just how close did the Rams come to not getting Matthew Stafford last offseason?
You are Locked On Rams, your daily Los Angeles Rams podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single day, your team every single day. My name is Travis Rogers. I host the Rams pregame and postgame show on their flagship station, ESPN 710, right here in LA. Lots going on with the Rams right now. I want to talk about a couple of different things. We're going to talk about Matthew Stafford here in just 1 second. We'll also talk about some of the players that are likely to be moving on from the Rams during the next league calendar year, which starts here in just a few days, the free agency situation, the draft situation, who are the most likely players to maybe not be with the team moving forward. And then lastly, we're going to go to some of the YouTube comments on our Locked On Rams YouTube channel as well, and we'll respond to some of those as well. But let's get right to it. Make sure you click that subscribe button on your podcast feed. It's always free and available wherever you get your podcasts, and Locked On Rams on YouTube as well. So make sure that you click that and you get it every single day. Okay, so just how close did the Rams come to not landing Matthew Stafford last offseason? Peter Schrager from Good Morning Football was on with Pat McAfee on his show. And obviously, if you are a Rams fan, you probably know this, but in the event that you do not, Peter Schrager and Sean McVay have a relationship. Peter is a pretty plugged in guy when it comes to the Rams. He knows kind of what's up. He was talking about on Pat McAfee's show about, we talked so much about the chance encounter in Cabo, right? What do you know? Sean McVay's here, and what do you know? Andrew Whitworth is here, and wow, is that Matthew Stafford in the hot tub? Why don't we sit down and get to know each other a little bit, right? That story. And we know it, and it worked out. Rams going to win the Super Bowl. But this is one of those, if one person does one thing a little bit differently at somewhere along the line prior to that meeting, who knows if it ever comes together. Peter Schrager was talking about how the Colts were very close to getting something done for Matthew Stafford, that Matthew Stafford was willing to go to Indianapolis. They had a very small group of teams that he was willing to go to, but Indy was on the list. But the Colts refused to go big, that the Colts refused to pay the asking price for Matthew Stafford. So the negotiations kind of stalled, that the Colts weren't ready to go all in on going to get the quarterback that they felt they needed to go win the Super Bowl. The Rams were. And think about all of the things that have happened since they made that move. Think about everything that's happened here, and think about everything that's gone on in Indianapolis. The Colts are still looking for the quarterback of the future, right? They're still looking for the Colts are a good team, but they're missing that guy behind center. They're missing the guy that can make plays. They're missing the guy that maybe doesn't have that understanding of when not to make the big mistake. Matthew Stafford clearly makes mistakes, but when he had to be at his best, he absolutely was. They just traded Carson Wentz to the Washington Commanders. They are still in the process of looking for something. And this is why I'm so bullish on the Rams. And this is why I loved what they did a year ago, and I love it even more right now. Put yourself in your mindset where you were about a year ago, right? When they made the deal to send Jared Goff to the Lions, a couple of first-round draft picks in exchange for Matthew Stafford. It was exciting, to be sure. But it was, who knows, right? Who knows how good he's going to be when you get him with a good team. Now, we know the answer to it now, so it seems obvious. It seems like it's an incredibly easy call to make. Oh, once you put Matthew Stafford on a great team, they're going to go win a whole bunch of games, win the Super Bowl. I mean, yeah, now we know. But then it was, well, we'll see. Yeah, he's a better quarterback than Jared Goff. I don't think there's any question about that. But is he that much better than Jared Goff that you give away 2 first-round picks, that you go all in on something like this? Because if it doesn't work, where does it leave you? And that was the question that I'm sure the Colts are asking themselves. I'm sure the Rams have, when they're having their powwows, when they're going through these things, kick that around the table, right? Hey, look, what if this doesn't work, where are we? And the answer is, we're kind of up the creek. How do you fix it at that point? You don't have a bunch of high draft picks. You've gone through a couple of different quarterbacks that won't have worked. You've spent a whole bunch of money. You've spent a whole bunch of capital. Now what? And the answer is, I don't know. The good news is that didn't scare the Rams off. They said, we do think it's going to work, but even the risk of it not working, it's not big enough to prevent us from taking this shot. And that's why I love this team the way that I do. And that's why I think Rams fans are so bullish about this team. Because think about what happened. Bobby Wagner gets released by the Seahawks a couple of days ago. And immediately everybody in the Rams universe like, well, can we find a way to get this done? They're the team that goes big. They're the team that's bold. Indianapolis had a chance to go get what turns out to be one of the better quarterbacks in the league. And they balked because they were afraid of the price. They balked because they were perhaps thinking, you know what? Carson Wentz knows Frank Reich's system. Carson Wentz is this. Phillip Rivers is that. They're just trying to fill little holes along the way as opposed to taking a big swing and trying to make something happen. The Rams take big swings and make something happen. Because if they don't get it done, who knows how it shakes out, right? Maybe something totally crazy goes down. You don't get Stafford and you turn and all of a sudden the Aaron Rodgers situation blows up the way that it did. You can get your hands on him. I don't know how it shakes out. But knowing what did ultimately happen, that they did make the big trade, that they did go all in, and that it paid off the way that it did, how good does it feel? And this is, look, the Lakers are a perfect example. Lakers went all in on Russell Westbrook, and it didn't work. Didn't work. The Dodgers went big on Max Scherzer and Trey Turner, and ultimately, it didn't work. You go for it hoping for the best, but the flip side is always out there. The Rams decided to go for it, and they got the ultimate reward. The Colts decided not to go for it, reportedly, and they land where they landed, which is out of the playoffs because they couldn't beat a Jacksonville team on the last day of the season. You think a team with a really high-level quarterback loses that game the way that they did? I don't know. Doesn't feel like it. The Rams went for it. It paid off, and they've been rewarded handsomely for it. And again, this has ripples on the pond. This is now they don't have to worry about finding a quarterback. I don't know how much longer Matthew Stafford's going to play, but it's going to be for a while. I know maybe it's 3 years, maybe it's 5. I don't know, but they don't have to worry about finding a quarterback for a period of time. And in this league, we all know if the quarterback is right, you can kind of pick around the edges and fix some other things along the way. But if the quarterback is not right, it doesn't matter what's around the edges because eventually that guy's going to have to make some plays. And if he can't, doesn't matter. You're stuck in the mud. We all remember that, right? You all remember the idea of, hey, we're pretty close, but we just need a play here. We just need to, don't throw it there. Don't hold on to the ball. Get rid of the ball. Nope. It all falls apart because we've seen it. Boldness, aggressiveness, the willingness to take risk on and know that the heat's going to come if it doesn't hit and going for it anyway. That's what the Rams did, and they were rewarded incredibly handsomely. And I know that as a Rams fan, I feel great about where they are right now. I don't know about Colts fans and how they feel about what they did not do. It's always, the trade that you don't make is always kind of a weird one. If we would have done this, what happens? Well, nobody really knows. I can tell you this, they would have been better off with Stafford than they would have been with Carson Wentz. Turns out most teams would probably be better off with Matthew Stafford than a lot of these other teams around the NFL because he's that good of a quarterback. The Rams were big, they were bold, they were risk takers, and ultimately rewarded hugely. Okay, so it's that time of the year where teams are thinking about who's coming in, but more importantly, perhaps, who might be going out. We'll take a look at some of the Rams players who are likely to leave heading into next season, but not before we talk about BetOnline, right? When these players leave, who goes here, who goes there, who's coming in. These odds are changing all the time. So for the latest odds, contests, player props, betonline.net is the number one source for all your sports betting needs and information. And even though football isn't being played right now, it's the tournament, right? The college basketball tournament is just around the corner, and BetOnline remains the best spot for all your scores, podcasts, and news this season. So not just basketball, not just football, whatever you're into, BetOnline is your continued source for all your sport wagering information, live betting, your favorite Vegas casino games, all that stuff. So head on over to the website today. Use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. And thanks again for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single day, free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Also, make sure you're following Locked On NFL, Locked On experts covering the biggest stories from around the NFL every Monday through Friday in less than 30 minutes. It, too, is free and available wherever you get your podcasts. All right, so let's go to this next part here about who's coming and who's going. So every year at this time, every team has a list of guys they think will be back, maybe guys they're not quite sure if they're coming or going, and then guys that are probably most likely to leave, right? I want to talk about those guys right now with the Rams and some of these players that are unlikely, not 100% sure, but unlikely to be back with the Rams starting in their 2022 title defense season. And let's start with Sebastian Joseph Day. He has been a very, very good player for the Rams since he came in. This was one of these guys that came in kind of unheralded, not necessarily like the next big thing, the guy that you thought was going to become a perennial all-pro player along the way. But he got a little bit better and a little bit better and a little bit better. And all of a sudden, he becomes a regular part of your defense. Now, he missed a good chunk of last season. He tore his pec and missed a good chunk of the year. He did come back. He was available in the Super Bowl. But the Rams have some depth at that position, and he's kind of outplayed what they can pay him. It's a weird thing in the NFL. You get to a point where you're too good to afford, right? That you can only pay so many. Even the Rams can only afford to pay so many guys at any one point. So if you're paying Jalen Ramsey what he's making, if you're going to redo Matthew Stafford, if you're going to redo Aaron Donald, you got to pay Odell, you got to pay Von Miller, you got to pay Cooper Kupp, you got to pay all of these star players. Somebody's going to be the guy that feels the pinch, and Sebastian Joseph Day feels like one of those guys because he's going to get some offers on the market that the Rams maybe can't do. So what does that leave? Where does that leave the Rams? I think it leaves them in a pretty good spot. They have some other guys, whether it's Marquise Copeland, Bobby Brown, maybe they draft another player at that position. You have Greg Gaines, who played very, very well for them along the way. I think that's a position where the Rams feel comfortable that if he leaves, they're still in a very good spot. You saw how they played the vast majority of the season without him and still were pretty effective at that position. I think that lends itself very likely that Seabass is probably down the road. Great guy here in the community, too. Everybody likes Sebastian Joseph Day. I've gotten a chance to speak with him a few times. A really good dude, but probably has outplayed his time here in LA. He's just too good of a player. And at that number, you got to spread that money around somewhere else. Let's go to the next guy, Darius Williams. Now, this is an interesting one. 2 years ago, Darius Williams played really well for the Rams. Very, very well for them during the 2020 season. This last season, maybe a little bit less so. He was not that guy on the other side of Jalen Ramsey that you could feel like, okay, keep throwing at Darius Williams. He's going to get a bunch of interceptions. He's going to have tight coverage. He's not going to take a bunch of penalties. You felt pretty good about him at this point. I don't know if after seeing what he had last season, if that's going to work. Now, the good news is you've got some guys there that maybe you can slide in. Maybe you've got Dante Dion. Maybe you've got David Long. You've got some other guys. And this goes back to what we were talking about with Les Snead for a long time, which is sometimes you're going to have to put some faith in some lower drafted guys, some inexperienced guys, and say, listen, you're going to have to go out there and do it. This is probably going to be one of those cases because maybe somebody out there thinks that they can give Darius Williams a deal that the Rams don't feel that they want to match, that they'd rather have some compensatory draft picks along the way. So I wouldn't be surprised either if Darius Williams ultimately decides to leave and the Rams do what they've done in so many other places, say, you know what? We're not going to pay for somebody that we don't think is that valuable to what it is we do globally. We can slide a younger player in there and a more inexperienced player in there, and we can get by. It's risky to be sure. Darius Williams is a capable NFL cornerback. There aren't a million of those guys. And we've talked about it here on Locked On Rams, that is a position of need for the Rams. But I think the price and where he played last year and what they have on the bench and developing, and hope maybe go into the draft and do something there as well. I think Darius Williams is probably down the road. Now, lastly, let's go to that offensive line. We know Joe Noteboom is an unrestricted free agent. He may go. We'll see. Brian Allen, the center, obviously a big deal there. The Rams really like him. It seems like he and Matthew Stafford have a pretty good rapport worked out together. So perhaps both of those guys stay. We'll see with Noteboom. He's kind of a 50-50 guy. Feels like Allen is probably a guy that ultimately ends up staying where he is. But what about one of the other players on that offensive line? What about Austin Corbett? Interesting. They made a deal for him. But keep in mind, Austin Corbett, I believe, was the first pick of the second round not that long ago. And the Browns kind of gave up on him pretty quickly. And the Rams jumped on it. And it's another great example of the Rams kind of with a reclamation case, somebody else thought really wasn't the right guy. You know, we'll take a shot on him. I think of Dante Fowler like this when they took him away from Jacksonville. Austin Corbett comes from Cleveland, comes to the Rams, and more or less has held down a starting job ever since. Now, he's played well enough. He kind of falls into that Sebastian Joseph Day, Darius Williams situation where he's going to have priced himself out of what the Rams feel comfortable with doing on that line. Now, the good news for him perhaps coming back, but I think he's still likely to leave, is the continuity on the offensive line is very important to what the Rams do. The schematics that they have, the blocking schemes that they have, they need all five of those guys to really function as one single unit, right? The proverbial hand, right? Every finger needs to know where every other finger is or it doesn't work as well. He would be a loss in that regard. Now, they've had other players that they've been able to slide into some places here and there, but Austin Corbett is an interesting one. If he leaves, of all the guys we've talked about, that feels like one that maybe might be a little bit more challenging to replace along the way, as opposed to whether it's Sebastian Joseph Day, Darius Williams, or one of those other players. So those are the three guys that I think are probably most likely to leave at some point, probably most likely to go and get an offer from another team in the league where the Rams just can't quite get there financially. Look, you'd love to keep every guy that helped you win the Super Bowl, but the economics of it is, and especially when you got guys that are good players like the guys that we just talked about, other teams are going to want those guys too. This is one of the great challenges of any NFL season, especially a championship season, is can't pay everybody. You got to make some tough decisions, and that means that some guys are going to walk out the door. That means some other teams are going to grab some of your players along the way, and that's where the Rams are with those guys in particular. Speaking of trying to enjoy it for a little bit longer, we'll get to some of your YouTube comments coming up next. You guys are always awesome on the Locked On Rams YouTube channel. Send those along. You nibble on a Built Bar while you're doing it, right? I get it. We're past the new year. You're making some decisions and it's March, whatever. Summer's still away. You don't have to worry about it. Once you get on track and get ready with your eating, if nothing else, if you're not going to the gym every day, make good choices with your food. And that's where Built Bars come in, because they're covered in 100% real chocolate, 100% real chocolate, and they taste amazing, right? That's how they do it. They kind of do it the other way. They figure out how to make it taste great, and then they put all of the good stuff in it, so you're getting something that only has 130 calories, just 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, 17 grams of protein. That's all the good stuff you want. That's very little of the bad stuff that you don't want. Compare that to some of the other snacks that you're going on. You're going to see why Built Bar is a much, much better choice. Go to Built.com, use the promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off your order. Use the promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. Thanks for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single day. I am your host, Travis Rogers. And, of course, you can go to our YouTube channel, Locked On Rams on YouTube. You can check out what we're talking about. If you want to look at my adorable face along the way, you can do that too. And it's a great way for you to post some comments underneath the videos, and then we can respond to some of them along the way. For instance, let's start with Stan Long here, talking about Russell Wilson going to the Denver Broncos and what that means for the rest of the NFC West. He talks about how the Rams did own Russell Wilson along the way, but what about the other teams in the NFC West? Could that potentially lead to more wins for other teams in the division, and consequently making it more difficult on the Rams? It's a really good question. Like, which of these two things would you rather have, right? And I think this is what Stan was getting at, is we got a team that's got a very good quarterback in Russell Wilson in our division that is a tough out, but for whatever reasons, matchup reasons, just you kind of figured the guy out. You have a great deal of success against him, and you know that you can beat him more often than he's going to beat you. You can feel it's a reasonable position, and then he's going to take care of the 49ers. He's going to take care of the Arizona Cardinals, right? It's an interesting one, that they're going to buy you a little additional room by beating some of those other teams. Or would you rather have somebody new in the division, maybe somebody that isn't nearly as accomplished as Russell Wilson, but now the other teams in the division, namely Arizona and San Francisco, have a much greater chance of picking up some wins against Seattle along the way? Because Seattle and the Rams, for the last, call it maybe 5, under Sean McVay, it's been the Seattle and the Rams, right? The 49ers have been a good team too. Obviously made a Super Bowl appearance in there, but Seattle and the Rams kind of knocked it back and forth, which means Seattle's beating the other teams in the division. I wonder if Stan isn't onto something right there. Russell Wilson sticking around. Aaron Donald can still terrorize him. It's funny looking at some of the other posts on that video. Not a lot of people were like, oh, thank goodness he's gone. It was that's fine. We took care of that guy pretty well. Great player, but he never really scared me as a Rams fan. Can it be both? It always felt like both for me. It felt like one of those. Russell Wilson, I always felt pretty good going into those Seahawks games because the Rams had success against Seattle. But there was always the moment, too, of, that's a pretty scary guy. Let me ask you this. Jimmy G is dropping back with 2 minutes to go, or Russell Wilson is dropping back with 2 minutes to go. Who would you rather see back there, right? Only the Rams had a whole hell of a lot more trouble with Jimmy G over the last few years than they did Russell Wilson. It's an interesting theory, and one that it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. I think I'd always rather have him somewhere else, because who knows when he figures out the Rams, when they figure it out. But Russell Wilson leaving the division, I think, ultimately is pretty good news for the Rams. This is from Radioactive Vape, and talking about Aaron Donald, the article in Sports Illustrated about how he hasn't come out and said, I will 100% be back with the Rams next year. All signs pointing to that. Still nothing that says he's leaving for sure either. But it's a question that I think a lot of people are thinking of, including Radioactive Vape, who says, Why can't I selfishly enjoy the Super Bowl win without having to worry about it upsetting and falling apart? He talks about all of the great things that the Rams have done this season, and why do we have to go right into this is the great challenge, right? This is what makes professional sports, or really all sports in general, so much fun, and why we keep coming back year after year after year. Because I don't know about you, but I can guarantee you Sean McVay and Les Snead maybe take a week or so to kind of enjoy the moment. You know, it's reflection time or whatever they call it. But it can't be too long before you have to start rethinking again of, hey, what are we going to do? How are we going to keep Sebastian Joseph Day? Are we going to keep Darius Williams? Is Von Miller coming or going? Is Odell's knee going to heal in time? What about Robert Woods and where he is? And now we got to figure out to rebuild our offensive line. Is Andrew Whitworth coming back? Is he going to stay? You've got a million different questions. If you just sit around with a cigar and a cocktail, enjoy the Super Bowl forever and ever, you're not going to get them very often. Now, you and me, Radioactive Vape, we can enjoy them for a little bit longer than they can, but these are the questions that pop up almost immediately after a championship team. If you just continue to enjoy, I want to enjoy it too, but Les Snead can't, Sean McVay can't. They got to get answers from these guys because they got to go back to work because, believe it or not, mini camps are going to be open, the draft is taking place, and we're going to be playing football like that. And all of a sudden, it's like, hey, you know, we never really considered what would happen if Aaron Donald left, and now you're caught with your pants down. What do? It's the responsibility of those guys to always have those contingencies. Not a ton of fun to talk about as fans, but that's certainly the way that it goes in the front office of these teams. And finally, Fran Varga on Bobby Wagner. The Rams have a hell of a pitch. Super Bowl championship, a great front office, great coaching, a great team, not to mention that it's Los Angeles. I think that is going to be something that we talk about a lot. Because here's the truth of the matter. Number one, a lot of players in the NFL come from around here, right? There's a lot of good football players in California, in Southern California in particular. So there's going to be a lot of hometown guys that maybe want to come back and play for their hometown team. Not in the sense that it's a hometown team like been here forever, grew up rooting for the Rams as a little kid, because the timing of it all when they were gone, that's not it. But hey, my mom and dad are in LA. My uncles are in LA. My family is in LA. My grandmother, whatever it is. It's an interesting poll. And then all of the other things that Fran talks about, I think, are incredibly important as well. Number one, the pitch is, do you want to compete for a Super Bowl? Because we are going to be able to do that for the foreseeable future. Do you want to play on a team that functions correctly? There's not, I say this all the time, but I think it repeats or bears repeating. The Rams don't have a lot of drama. There isn't a lot of nonsense swirling around. There's not a lot of players that are doing some things that are taking away from the football. They're a pretty buttoned up group of guys. And if you're somebody that just wants to come in, play football, make a little money, play in a great stadium, this is a pretty good place to do it. The front office has proven that they're willing to go out and make moves, big moves, to try to get some of these things done. So that's a great part of it. And then, of course, like Fran said, it's LA, it's SoFi Stadium. Who wouldn't want to do that? Who wouldn't want to be a part of everything that's going on there? Call that your home. You're going to play on national. You're going to have Sunday night games, Monday night games constantly along the season, and you got a chance to win. Of course, the wild card in all of this is money, as it always is. The Rams have a vacancy at that position, or at least some availability for a whole bunch of plays along the way. Makes a lot of sense. Whether or not he'll take the money, whether or not someone else comes in with so much more money that you can't really look the other way, time will tell. But it makes a lot of sense. And you're right, Fran. The pitch that the Rams have for all of their potential free agents, all of their draft picks, everything else, it is a very, very powerful one. It feels like it's going to be a powerful one for a very long time. Okay, that does it for this edition of Locked On Rams. Thanks for making us your first listen. As for your second listen, how about Locked On Draft? Ryan Tracy and former NFL cornerback Eric Crocker bring the NFL draft to life every day with insight and analysis on college football prospects and NFL front offices. And just like Locked On Rams, it is free and available wherever you get your podcasts. All right, until next week, whose house? It's Locked On Rams house.